ma-NGO munomunyika vanenge vari muno vanenge vadarika murayiro watakabvumira kuti vaite munyika muno, I will chase them away. Ndichavadzinga muno munyika. They must just do what they profess, what they declared they want to do in this country. We can do without them.
Isu tiri kuti ma-NGO ngaite basa. As my political party don't fear my NGOs. Ari kufidha vanhu vakapuhwa chikafu, vakapuhwa utano, zvakanakira nyika, kwete kudzingira nema-NGO.
Ndapasina kupindira kwaishe, nechokwadi pasi pano, taiona moto, marongera vanoita wepanyika, vanoda kudisu vamwe, tioneswe moto. Ndapasina kupindira kwaishe, nechokwadi pasi pano, taiona moto, marongera vanoita wepanyika, vanoda kudisu vamwe, tioneswe moto. Ndapasina kupindira kwaishe, kana dzimba dzedu dzingadai dziri dzavo, mawanzira vanoita dzimba dzavo, vanoda kudisu vamwe, tigare mumiti, dzimba 10 pamunhu umwe chete, vanoda kudisu vamwe, tigare mumiti, dzimba 10 pamunhu umwe chete, vanoda kudisu vamwe, tigare.
Welcome to this edition of The Situation Right Now with me, your host as usual, Dara B. Now, we all know that the government is pushing what they call the PVO Bill. Now, it is, when we say a bill, it's the process of making a law which once signed by the president becomes the PVO Act. That law seeks to control, seeks to change things as we knew them in terms of dealing with civic society organizations, or some of us would want to know them as non-governmental organizations, NGOs. And a number of those proposed changes have actually sent a shiver down the spine of many organizations who feel targeted by government and those who want to stay in power. So we're going to be discussing its effect and how it can be mitigated. On this, The Situation Right Now, in proud partnership with We Lead. Join me just after this break for more. So welcome back to this, The Situation Right Now with me, your host, Dara B, on Heart and Soul TV and radio in proud partnership with We Lead. Now, what is We Lead? We Lead is a youth leadership development organization founded upon the idea that youth leadership development is the most efficient and sustainable way to develop the world. They also believe that development starts with young people and is accelerated when young people harness their leadership capabilities. And this is the essence of this show today with me, your host Dara B. Mhlanga, and I've got not your usual, but young, youth-driven private voluntary organizations, PVO, who will be talking to me around this PVO bill. Now I've got McDonald Munyoro from NAYO, and I'll allow him to explain and introduce himself, but I also have Bridget Mambondiani from the Junior Court Council, and I have, okay, this name I'll have to leave him to say it himself. His surname is Chipani from the National Youth Organization. Now, welcome to the studio, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. Now, I'll start with you, McDonald. Just a brief introduction about yourself and what you do at NAYO, and also just in doing that, explain to me what comes to you when we talk about the PVO bill in its state right now?
All right. So thank you very much, Darabi. My name is McDonald Munyoro, and I work with the National Association of Youth Organizations, NAYO. It's an umbrella association for youth civil society organizations that work across the 10 provinces of Zimbabwe. And it's a privilege and honor to be with you on this particular show. So I think just diving into the gist of the matter why we are here today, I would say that when I think of the PVO amendment bill in its current state, I see a lot of doom and gloom for the majority of civil society actors that we have in Zimbabwe. Because one thing about our country is that we've got a vibrant civil society, whether it's in the areas of democracy, human rights, humanitarian work, social care, social welfare. So it's coming into play has got some very serious and immediate consequences into how these organizations have organized internally, how they've organized when they do their programs in communities in Zimbabwe, and also even in terms of how they've been able to access financing and also run some of the programs that they are currently running in Zimbabwe.
Amazing. We'll test some of the things that you've just said there, but I want to come to you, Endridge. Endridge Chapani. Just introduce yourself to us, your organization, and just briefly your take of the PVO bill in its current state.
Okay, my name is Endridge Chapani, and I'm coming from Paukama National Youth Orixis Foundation, which is just a youth organization which focuses on youth participation and policy development processes. When it comes to the PVO bill, I just say it's a state where the nation is waiting for an act to be put in place. I can say, well, like going back to how it's going, it's a bill that went through public consultations, and I have to look into areas of misinformation and disinformation in regards to the bill.
So we will look to the misinformation and possibly seek to correct those misinformation, because it's very crucial aspect for us to ensure that people are not misinformed. Bridget Mambundiani, welcome to the show from the Junior Court Council. Now you should be our lawyer in the South, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful lawyer in the making, the future Beatrice Mtetwa is of this world. But Bridget, let us talk a brief introduction of yourself and also your view on the PVO bill.
Thank you. My name is Bridget Mambondiani. I work with Junior Court Council, which is an organization that is aimed at conscientizing the youth on the legal frameworks of the country, in particular the Constitution. So when looking at the PVO bill, to me it raises the question of good law and bad law, because with everything that has been said about the PVO bill, at the face of it, it is prima facie a bad law. For now, that's all that I can say.
Prima facie. We're getting deep here, guys. We're getting deep here. Prima facie. I am sure you'll explain to us what that really means. But McDonald, you spoke about gloom, doom, but government argues that this law is necessary, and it's necessary in a number of ways to deal with money laundering, to ensure that NGOs stick to their core business. And if you're sticking to your core business, they have no problem with you. Now, why would you see anything wrong with me basically saying, if you are my gardener, you should stay in the garden and shouldn't find yourself in the kitchen?
Okay. So I think world over, the issue of regulation of civil society organizations, or what we commonly call NGOs here, is not a new issue. And I think in different international instruments, regional and even within our own constitution and local laws, we also even have laws that try to speak to how these organizations should exist and function. And I think coming to the private voluntary organizations amendment bill, you'd find that one of the key issues around the big amendments was around meeting, I think, recommendation 8 of the Financial Action Task Force. And if you look at recommendation 8, it's talking about issues of trying to limit issues around illicit financial flows and money laundering that happens within the non-profit sector, which is the NGO sector. But you'd find that the bill also goes further to introduce new things. For instance, as civil society organizations, you will not be able to partake in any political lobbying or advocacy. Specifically, what they are saying is, if you are running for a position in a political party, we can't support you in any way. We can't sympathize you in any way. But then you'd find that if you go into the Constitution, about Section 67, it talks about collectivism, about organizing around the things that we believe in. Whether you are civil society or you are a citizen of Zimbabwe, we have those rights of being able to to gather and to organize and to push our own ideas and ideals. Beyond that, you'd also find that they are also mentioning that it's for the purposes of improving the general administration, regulation and functioning of civil society organizations in Zimbabwe. But you'd find that some of the measures which they are now introducing as part of those broad, seemingly good aims, I think brings into what I think Bridget was trying to talk about when she mentioned the issue around good or bad law.
Which things? Let's be specific, because our viewers who are watching don't want to stand there and say there are things that are going to be bad. They want to know them so that they challenge those particular. Is it not?
Yeah. So I think, for instance, the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill, it's trying to come in and make sure that all civil society organizations in Zimbabwe become registered under the Private Voluntary Organizations Act when it becomes an act. Currently, organizations are registered through the Register of Deeds. They are also registered through common law by the basis of their own constitutions. But this bill wants to make sure that when it becomes law, we all fall into one registration framework. But you'd find that by the diversity of size and function and purpose, organizations have had the multiplicity of options in terms of how they want to be legally recognized. So the challenge now becomes, when we all have to become registered under the PVO Act, it means as an organization, you stop and you cease your functions. And you become registered at the discretion of the registrar of PVOs. So what will that happen, for instance, to organizations that, for instance, are driving work around governance, human rights, and democracy? Issues, I think, that are considered in this part of the world to be regime change, agenda-driven. Beyond that, you'd also find that it gives a lot of discretionary powers to the minister, where, for instance, the minister can say that your organization is high risk. And because it's high risk, we're going to close you guys.
High risk.
He has not even taken an assessment to even assess and say how high risk is organization X. But he simply will have those kind of discretionary powers. And I think also beyond that, you'd also find that in terms of financing, the amendment is also trying to put restrictions, especially on organizations that will continue to be registered under the Register of Deeds. Yet we are saying that with the freedom of association, the idea of financing should be a given, because that is only how these organizations can raise the finances that allow them to do the work that they do. We are also saying that with the freedom of association, organizations must be allowed to choose whether to be a trust, a PVO, or to be existing under the common law. So the moment that we begin to infringe into these rights, and remember the freedom of association is provided for under the Bill of Rights. So it becomes a conversation, I think, that we really need to have and look into, and really see what could be the impact of these amendments moving forward for Zimbabweans and for the civic society. Yeah.
And Mangudya politics, Kaim. So you guys are getting into the domain that you're not supposed to be. This is why this law has become necessary. You are seeking, like he says, regime change agenda. Why are you doing that?
No, we are not doing that. Okay, so when we are talking about politics, I believe that everything is just politics. Mm-hmm. And now if you're saying that organizations that has to do with The PVO says organizations that support or oppose, and it doesn't state how clear is supporting and how clear is opposing. So now it's basically saying that everyone is caught off guard, right? And if we are talking about issues that has to do with the human rights, and it then tells us that if this bill comes to power or if it becomes law, then a lot of gaps are going to be created. There is no going to be justice or support that's going to be given to people who suffer from political violence. There is no going to be support to people who just have their rights violated. So what the NGOs are doing is just doing governance and participation, and everything is just political. So if they say that if you oppose or support politics, then you're caught off guard, it's like a gray area that needs to be addressed within the bill.
But why would you be supporting or opposing politics? If you, for instance, you're doing humanitarian work, you're just giving people food, right? Or I'm understanding you wrong?
No, that's how it is. But if you look at it in another way, it's more like NGOs come in to cover the loopholes that are within the government, where the government cannot stretch its hand. So the existence of NGOs kind of prove like the miswork within the government, saying it's not reaching out to the people. But we see that the NGOs play a vital role aiding to the government, because what we all trying to do is to make sure that our citizens are living better livelihoods.
Amazing. You spoke about good and bad law, right? Now let's hear, you said at the prima facie case that you have at the moment, to bad law. Why do you say that?
So when looking at the PVO bill, from the point of the impacts that it's going to have, especially on the youth and the civic society, that's when one would arrive to the conclusion that at the face of it, it's bad law. Because for number one, if we are looking at the youth bill, you actually realize, as was mentioned, that it means organizations, those that were already existing, will have to deregister and register again. And the period of registering would be at the discretion of the registrar, which means this is going to lead to the closure of some of the existing organization and flight of some of them, because people will have to start again on a rethink on how to register again. So number two, when we are looking at the PVO bill, it's also going against the national agenda of opening Zimbabwe to international business, because it then means that there is going to be strict monitoring on the funds that are coming in the country, and that will then also lead to stiffening of those opportunities which were then available to the youth, creating employment for them. And also when looking at the PVO bill in relation to the spaces that have been created by the civic society towards the youth in enhancing leadership and innovation spaces, it then means that if the government then has power over these organizations, it means even the plans, even the action that's going to be taken by this organization will have to be in accordance with what the government is saying. And this, at the face of it, will lead to a scenario whereby it's either, if you are not agreeing to what they're saying, you have to close down or move to other places. And for the youth, this means loss of employment, because we can look at... Well, we say that the Constitution provides for your freedom to choose the occupation that you want, your freedoms to profession. And really, we shouldn't be limited to then saying that because our country is providing for teaching spaces and medicine spaces, then we all be restricted to that. I mean, we still want to explore other avenues. There are a lot of people who are really benefiting from employment in the civic society.
Amazing. So, what then can be done, to protect this space? Because this is still a bill. Mm-hmm. What can be done to ensure that government also sees these things and begin to consider them?
What can be done is, for example, what we are doing right now, conscientizing, bringing out how we are actually interpreting the bill, so that if there is by any chance that the government can then amend again the clauses that they have proposed. For example, I just heard that currently they were doing that process. And also, what also can be done is to also make sure that the government itself looks upon the consideration that are being put forward to it by the society, and then probably we hope that they'll act upon them. But then when it comes to issues of how the law is made and stuff like that, then the discretion is upon the legislators to then decide if they're going to pass the bill or not. So this is when we also say that as the youth, as the youth and the civic society, we can play our part, but it also has a limited extent.
McDonald, do you think the government wants to listen?
All right, you're like putting me on the spot.
Sure.
So when we had the public hearings for the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill, I think across the majority of the 10 provinces, there was a clear outcry to say that the bill was going to have enormous effect on people. Because, for instance, imagine you are an old woman, you are a young person who's part of an NGO program that is helping you with aid or access to services in a rural area. It means that the moment that that organization is going to be deregistered, whatever you're getting from them as form of aid, you're no longer receiving. And for some of those people, they have been surviving on some of these humanitarian work and aid work. So it will mean that in the short and immediate term, those livelihoods will be disrupted. And I think already we know that as a country, we are not doing so well in terms of providing for our citizens and issues around poverty, etc. So the consequences of that would be like very, very significant. So across the public hearing, citizens would raise such concerns, where they would object to this bill. And I think we even had different organizations that even tried to give us live feeds and cover that. But I should find that when the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee that was leading the public hearings made their report, they also did acknowledge a bit to say that the citizens raised concerns. But I think how we begin to measure if the government is listening is how they translate what is said in the public consultations. Because Parliament is there in a representative capacity and role, and ideally when citizens take their issues to them, they must also then take them to Parliament and they become part of the discussion points. But if you look at how the bill has been debated in Parliament, it has not carried the spirit of the submissions that the Zimbabwean people gave during the public hearings. And I think it goes back to a conversation that we always hit back as comrades to say, I mean, like legally, when we say something to the members of Parliament, should they really say it? Like, if they don't, then what happens to them? Because we know what happens, for instance, when they don't toe the political party line. That gets them in Parliament. But what if they don't toe the line where they're representing me as a citizen or us as a constituency? And I think when we look at how this bill is being debated in Parliament, it really goes to tell us and show us that at times the government actually does not listen to what the people are saying.
Amazing. Just another quick question. Did you or did you not have a conversation with someone who set my studio today? Because
it was a Sunday morning. I just woke up and I'm like, I'm putting this on.
and then they come and give you this couch. I mean, we've got to have a conversation. But he speaks of the issue of Parliament being a representation of what the people believe or the people in their constituencies. But our constitution has a section, 129K, which sort of takes away the representation role of Parliament in terms of representing the people and gives it to the political party to say the moment you stop representing the interests of political party that sponsored you into Parliament, they can recall you. So with that clause alive, how are you any confident that the parliamentarians are representing you, and will they listen to the issues raised during the public hearing?
Yeah, all right. This issue, right? It's a little bit deep. We understand that parliamentarians also tend to come down as people who then focus on their livelihoods, on themselves. Where is my food coming from, and all that. So now, when people raises their concerns, and then the political party says this, then they'll come to a point where they evaluate and say, okay, my paycheck is not coming from the people, it's coming from the political party. So they end up just doing what the political party says, which is why even when it comes to the youth quota system, we were trying to push an agenda to say that we want that representation to be non-partisan, where we just have youth who are representing the concerns of the young people, not the political party. Because once the political party is there, everything gets diluted.
So what is your view now about this section 129K? How it is do you think it is being weaponized to ensure that political parties emerge more represented in parliament than the people who are elected?
Yeah.
Who elect them, rather, sorry.
Yeah, I think it just gives power to the political party over power to democracy.
Amazing, amazing. Bridget, how do you think, we've been talking about the law, around the law, but how do you think that this law is going to have an effect to the general person when government is supposed to be about the general person?
Okay, so when looking at the law in relation to its impact on the general person, we have seen that the civic societies, they've been doing a lot targeting the general person. Take, for example, when Cyclone Idai happened, the interventions that came there to help the people were actually from these non-governmental organizations. Now, to think of it, if then the government then decides upon making the bill, the act, this is going to change a lot of things for people who then were depending upon that sector in helping them. Take, for instance, like what McDonald mentioned, there were some people who their lives is entirely dependent upon the help that they're getting from a certain organization. And if then the government is going to shine a blind eye on that and decide to move on with the bill, it means a whole lot of things are going to change in Zimbabwe, and a lot of people are going to be really affected.
Now, Chapter 1 of the Constitution has founding values and principles, right? And among those founding values and principles, maybe I can just have the benefit of actually just reading directly, so that so that I do not misquote the law or myself, whichever comes first. This is how you for the founding values and principles. Now, Zimbabwe is founded on the respect of the following values and principles: supremacy of the Constitution, the rule of law, fundamental human rights and freedoms, the nation's diverse culture, religious and traditional values, recognition of inherent dignity and worth of each human being, recognition of the equality of all human beings, gender equality, good governance, recognition and respect of the liberation struggle. Now, on C, which is which is where I would want to focus, but you can focus on any, the fundamental human rights and freedoms. Now, do you think that as we look at the PVO Bill, does it conform to these founding principles of fundamental human rights and freedoms, or of the nation's diverse culture and religious and traditional values? Does it?
All right, so when we look at the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill, it's trying to make some changes around how we exercise the freedom to association. And with the freedom to association, we are saying you can become a group, choose your name and choose your objectives, and also choose how you want to be recognized at law. Some even exist as social movements. They're not even anywhere at law. Some even exist just by having a group, and then we have a constitution, and then we are now X and B. So you'd find that when we look at what the constitution says, the freedom to association is crystal clear. But you'd find that the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill is coming to put restrictions to this particular right. A very good example, building on to some of the submissions previously, you'd find that through the Private Voluntary Organizations Act or Bill, for instance, if the minister feels that there's, I don't know, something wrong with your organization, let's say they say it's high risk, they can be able to change your executive committee or your management or your board. The minister can put whoever he wants, I think for a period of up to about 6 or so months, whilst I think the court, the issue is being dealt with maybe in a local court or something like that. And when those people are put in power, they have real and actual executive powers, where they can fire, they can hire, they can change the organization in whatever direction they want. And we know that when we look at most civil society organizations, they're not really big. So you know how just putting someone for 6 months, the kind of changes that they can put and how it can damage an organization's reputation. Yet we are saying that with the freedom of association, when we say that our leader is Peter, the idea is that we believe in the leadership of Peter, and Peter has to be our leader, which I think is why even I think at some point with leadership issues within ZIFA, FIFA, and all of that. Because for me, when I look at it, it's all about the choice of the people. So you'd find that it's now coming in to put limitations on how we exercise that right. And you'd find that within the Constitution also, there are other civic and political rights that are provided for. And anything that has got to do with advocacy and lobby, let's also be very honest there, it's got to do with politics.
Is the price of bread political?
Yes, it's very political. Because who gets to choose how much bread costs are the leaders that you put. Whether they become the leaders in the cabinet, in the parliament, or in the Politburo, or whatever animal that is created, they make those decisions. So you'd find that when it comes to some of our civil and political rights, it's going to limit those, especially on the part of civil society. Civil society has been there to conscientize people on what their rights are. It has helped them to defend and to claim them. And looking at elections, a lot of things happen during elections. I work with young people. Young people have historically been marginalized. What would be wrong if we identify him who wants to run for office as an independent or as a party X candidate, and we help him to become a good leader and understand how he can deliver as a councillor and a member of parliament? Would there be anything wrong with that? And I just want to come back and tease something that he was mentioning around politicization of maybe some of the aid and the work that happens. If you are a humanitarian organization and you come to my rural constituency and you are to give maize or rice or whatever, if we have politicized our society, we could see that as if they are lobbying for me. Because now people will come and say, so our MP, he has got food and he's got means and he knows people and he knows, So you'd find that, it's just coming in to narrow the space, to shrink the civic space that we've been able to exist previously, especially I think under what we've experienced from the time that we said we're now in the Second Republic. Things were really open, but now it's like we're turning and we're now coming in to squeeze those rights to a point where even the interlocutor between the government and the citizens, which is civil society, might actually find itself in a very, very difficult position where it might not even be able to maneuver and defend some of these rights enshrined in the Constitution.
The more things change, the more they remain the same. But I want us to shift a bit from the PVO and look at how you as the young people can participate or can ensure, because this PVO bill and everything else hinges around lawmaking, right? What is your role then in making sure that laws that you want or laws that you believe will develop this country are put in place?
Okay. You've driven us off the PVO because I was still going to touch on what I...
Then you come back.
Okay, yeah. So I wanted to touch on what he said about the minister having to remove the executive of the organization. We're now coming back to that Constitution 129K, where it's giving power to the political party, right? And now we are saying that the minister kupati kwaari kubva kune mayouth emsangano, and mandate yake is to create employment for those people. So now we are going to be touching on issues that has to do with even corruption, where the minister can just find interest in my organization and then they say, okay, we are removing you, and then they put their own people. So now we are talking about corruption, and the people that might be put in position might also be people who has less or no interest in the civic space. So now it's as good as shrinking and shutting off that organization. So the space is going to shrink, right? And talking about the issue of youth participating, I mentioned an issue around misinformation and disinformation. I think as the young people, we should be challenged to look for the correct information. Because when you look at the time that those consultations were done, people went in and just saying, "Atis kuda bill, it's bad." But then asking them, like, where exactly is it bad, people couldn't point out. So there was some level of misinformation there. So as the young people, we should go in and look for the right information. And if we are saying that the young people are the leaders of tomorrow, we actually give acknowledgement that they should be present participants of today, so as to inherit that future that we envision of tomorrow. So participation of today comes with a responsibility of the young people saying, these are the kind of laws that we want to see in the future when we get to the driver's seat, where we are saying now the young people are leading the nation.
Amazing. Now here we are on the situation right now with me, your host Dara Blessed Mklanga, and we are discussing issues around youth participation in lawmaking, in constitutional protection, and the issues around the PVO Bill. And I'm joined by young people in this studio, and we are discussing this afternoon how the PVO Bill will affect the people of Zimbabwe. We're also discussing how the young people can make a change in terms of the law. This program is proudly brought to you in proud partnership with We Lead. I'm going to come to you, Bridget. You're a lawyer, you're still studying law, so you're a lawyer in the making. What is it that you would want Zimbabweans to do around the law, around lawmaking rather, and constitutional protection to ensure that their rights are not whittled to this sense that the values of the Constitution are no longer respected?
Okay, thank you. So where we can start is starting by upholding those values, the principles that are enshrined in Section 3 of the Constitution, the rule of law, separation of powers. That alone is the starting point to ensuring that what is provided for in the Constitution is rightly upheld. And further looking to that, I think in Zimbabwe we have problems around information dissemination, and because of that, that's why we have had a situation whereby the government and the ministry then takes advantage of the people's unawareness to then stumble upon the law, and then at times also impose law that we then say such is bad law.
But in the event that you said we should start by implementing section, but in the event that it's not implemented, what should be done? In the event that, for instance, we have seen instances where it's not.
In the event that it's not, I think it then falls upon us as the citizens of Zimbabwe to then take action against our government. So now when I'm starting to say to take actions, one may then presume that I'm saying otherwise. But what I mean is that as the citizen of Zimbabwe, at the end of the day, we are the ones responsible for the constitution. It is we, the people, who have got the authority to then tell the government what we want. And I would like to say such is also the space that have been provided by the civic society, whereby we can air out these issues and try to find a way forward in then seeking remedy where we see that the government is not upholding the constitution.
So the constitution does allow for you to take action against your own government. This is actually very, very constitutional. It allows you to demonstrate, to petition. I mean, these are things that are provided, right?
Yes.
And the fact that when she mentioned that take action against a government, she wanted to be very quick to, what does this tell you about what you know, our society and liberties, you know, McDonald?
I think put simply, it simply tells us that at times there is no freedom after speech. And if you are to speak, you have to nurture your words very well, so that even in being direct, you're also diplomatic and you don't come out as being political.
Amazing. Now, is this the nation that as a young person you want to build? Because the moment you want to always be aware of what you're saying, and you also still feel some sort of creativity, do you not?
Well, I think having it been said in the Constitution that people have the rights to even protest or to write petitions, I think it then comes back to the people themselves upholding those rights and the ways that they use to approach in like the process of upholding those rights. Because now if people are talking about protesting, they start to talk about violence. But there are other like ways of protesting and yet not causing violence. And like it's said that for you to even protest, you need to like get authorization from the police themselves. So I think
you are angry and you say I don't want this, and you've got to go to the person you want to tell that I don't want this to ask for permission.
Yeah, you know what, it comes with maybe a level of discipline. Let's take government as an elder in a community where on cultural norms, the young people, you cannot just go in and saying mukuru matadza apa zvamatawara is really wrong and stuff. It's not like accepted culturally. So that's the same approach that we just need to use to say, yes, we are frustrated, yes, we are angry, but the way that we are going to express our concerns should be controlled in a certain way. It's not about the action, but the ideology behind that action. And right now, as the young people, we have grown into not believing in the government systems and some of the systems that we haven't even tried ourselves. So maybe as young people, we need to start to look into like how we can effectively engage the government better than just bashing on it and saying the government is not like working towards what we want. What is it that we, the young people, want? Let's raise our concerns. When we petition or when we raise our voices, let's just not say what you're doing is not working. Just like the PVO, people say it's bad. Okay, what is the solution that we are providing? It's bad on this section, that section. This section is correct, but maybe you can address this section in a way. Let's provide solution than just providing noise.
Do you think that the use of legal remedies is sufficient to protecting rights? Just the only use of, like, for instance, going to court, challenging through court processes, is it sufficient rather?
Well, as a learned person from the legal faculty, I would want to say it's always recommended that the legal way of the legal remedies should always be your first point of call. But then I would want to say that in the environment that we are living in Zimbabwe, it has been proven a lot that the legal remedy itself has not been worth the try because of, we then start to raise questions of judicial independence. Our judiciary itself, is it independent? And I can say that to some extent it's not. Once again, I'm trying to convey my words properly. So it then goes to say that we can approach the legal remedies, but to a greater extent, they haven't been efficient enough in upholding human rights.
So what are the other options?
Well, the other options, we can look into things such as, well, if I'd mentioned international remedies, again, it's coming back to the point of law. But I guess also as citizens, we can try by all means to address these issues by ourselves. We are the ones who vote for the government. We're the ones who are responsible for the people that are in power. So that comes back to where we can actually give advice to each other that we are the ones who should be making the decision on who should be in governance. This will draw us to the current issues of registering to vote, so that we ensure that the person that we are putting in the near future, they are going to be upholding our rights.
Amazing. Now, as we come to a close, McDonald, I'd want to hear your closing remarks on both the issue around the PVO Bill and the human factor, the youth participation. How do we make this work?
I think let me start with the youth participation factor. I find it very disempowering that you are hungry, you are sick, you are unemployed, and you really want to pass your message to government, and then I have to go and ask an authority somewhere to say, I want to hold a placard and tell the government this. Because Section 67 is very clear to say that even when the government is doing a program, we are free to say whatever we think and whatever we want, whatever positions. And I think we have allowed our context, the current laws that we have and the current system that we have, to disempower us to a point where you don't even know how to say what you want to say. If you listen to all of us here on set, we're trying to be very diplomatic so that our words are in context and not viewed as being out of context. And I don't think this is not the Zimbabwe that is enshrined in the 2013 Constitution. This was a constitution that we made as Zimbabweans, for us as Zimbabweans. So it means that it has to work for all of us. Section 20 is very clear about the importance of participation of young people, where it says that youth must be afforded opportunities for representation and participation across all spheres of life, including politics. So when we want to get into politics as youth, why should that conversation change? It's a constitutional right. It's something that is enshrined in our own constitution. And then coming to the issue of the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill, I think moving forward as Zimbabweans, we need to be a bit more invested in how laws are made in the country, so that we can begin to appreciate what's happening and where it's happening. Because in most cases, we begin to know that a new law is coming when it's before the parliament. But if you had to ask me, there are about 5 key stages that happen before the law comes to parliament, where the minister initiates. At some point, the minister goes to the cabinet with the law, it's approved, it goes to the Attorney General's office. At some point, it comes into parliament. And when it's coming into parliament, it's the actual bill. It's like law. It's not like the parliamentarians are teasing and putting the clauses. No, these are put and done somewhere. Then the representative function comes in parliament, where they go and they ask us and they debate and they make amendments to the proposed law. And I think what should also be quite worrying for all of us on this set is, as you even talk about the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill, it has undergone so many changes during the stages of parliamentary debate that now it actually looks like a new bill from the one that was subjected to us as citizens. And we should be asking ourselves and saying, when that happens, is it then going to come back again to us as citizens? Or because we gave legislative authority to members of parliament, we gave executive authority to the president of the cabinet, they are then going to make that decision on our behalf? Because then ultimately what it means and tells me is what we are giving the people and then what we are bringing back to them. It's like 2 different things. And I think that should be a conversation from the experience of this Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill that we need to have as a nation moving forward.
Amazing. Your closing remarks on the two issues.
Okay, on youth participation, I would say that the young people should start participating from an informed perspective. And it's a challenge that also comes to us as youth-led organizations or youth organizations serving for the youth to say when we are having these discussions, they shouldn't always sound like, because when we're talking about these issues, they now sound like a high table discussion where a general youth in the community does not understand. So we need to start packaging even information that we disseminate to the young people in a more relatable way where our fellows can understand, because it's not everyone who has the privileges to be to go to tertiary school, to study law, to even understand the Constitution. But we as the young people, as each brother's, each sister's keeper, we need to make sure that the sister next to me understands what I understand. So we need to break it down for the youth to participate meaningfully. And when it comes to the PVO, I think personally my concerns on it are two-way driven. One, I support it. The other one, I don't support it. But it's a matter of the clause within the bill. I support the issue on financial transparency at some point, because I'm trying to imagine myself being a parent and then my kid is just having money and spending money where I don't know that money comes from. At some level, it makes me feel uncomfortable to a point that I would want to know. But if those are clean and clear channels that my child is using, they wouldn't be feel bad about coming forward to say, no, this is where my money is coming from and this is how I'm using it. And then I go again, it's just the issue of the minister having the power to remove. It kind of drives the vision of the organizations off, and also it would put the CSOs on a marginalized space where even foreign funders, developing partners cannot find confidence in supporting the initiatives that are being run in the country, because they'll be like, I can put in a 200,000 today, then tomorrow the organization is closed. What's going to happen to my money and all that? So it will put even community and national development to the margin. So those are my remarks.
Amazing. Bridget?
Okay, my closing remarks pertaining to youth and participation. I would want to say that as youth, we should make it a culture to actually be involved in issues of governance, be it from the level of your family, and you grow from there. Because these are the things that at the end of the day, impact on how our future is going to be. They're the things that are going to determine whether you are going to be employed or not. So we have to make sure that we participate and we are represented as the youth, because we are the ones who know what we are going through most, and we are the ones, again, with the solutions of how we can remedy all the things that are happening in our environment. And when it comes to the PVO bill, I would want to say that one thing that I have got from this discussion is that when we are making these debates around things such as this bill, we should be coming from a point whereby we are well informed, to the extent that we then just don't attend a consultation and then stand on the point of saying that it is bad, whilst we don't have factual background as to how bad it is. Because the moment then we are talking of things without actually giving the factual details of it, it then means that it's going to be taken lightly. So we should invest in having knowledge about these things. And I would say my last words would be that for the youth and everyone, we should just know the Constitution, use the Constitution and guard it.
Amazing. It's said and absurd that governments must do for people what they can't do for themselves. Yet government that is failed to do for people what people can't do for themselves, wants to stop those who can do for the people what the government has failed to also do for the people. Now, the PVO Bill in its current form affects fundamental rights that are in the Constitution, in the sense that people have the right to mobilize, they have the right to canvass, they have the right, freedom of expression around issues that touch their lives, issues that concern them. And part of civil space and civil organization, part of it is to hold the government accountable to this, the Constitution. That is part of the role of civil society. And when we say civil society, we just mean organized citizens of a nation who are in a space and are talking about things that touch their lives. Now, this Constitution in Chapter 4, which is the Declaration of Rights, says that, 44 says, duty to respect fundamental human rights and freedoms. Now, someone or some sort of organization has to ensure that the government is respecting this part, the duty to respect fundamental human rights and freedoms. And this is political, in all, honestly speaking. So the Constitution says the state and every person, including juristic persons, and every institution and agency of the government at every level must respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights and freedoms of this chapter, the Bill of Rights, which include the right to life, the right to personal liberty, rights of arrested and detained persons, the right to human dignity, the right to personal security, the right from torture or cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. Now, this part, the right from torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. This has been a political scourge in our country. This has been political because torture, inhuman and degrading treatment has happened especially at the instigation of political violence. To say that civic society should not be allowed to talk about these things is to say, let those in power do as they wish. This cannot be right. This cannot be allowed. This is the situation right now. This is me, your host, Dara B. Mhlanga, in proud partnership with We Lead. Thank you very much to my guests for coming through and having this candid discussion, although diplomatic. Thank you. Until we meet next time, join us again on HSTV on the situation right now with me, as usual, Dara B. Dara Revan VSA. Thank you very much for liking and following us. Thank you very much for allowing us into your spaces for these discussions.